I'll call the City Council joint work session with the School Board of April 22nd, 2020 to order at 6 o'clock. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
Tom Baylor,
Here.
Kathy Sherman,
Here.
Jeff Guard is absent, Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer is absent, David Allison,
Here.
David Gleason.
Here.
That's a quorum of council. You guys do you want me to do yours? Barb Jewell. Present. Cheryl Gleason. Tammy Altermont.
Here.
Pete Hefner.
Here.
And Hank Krutoff. Here. And that's all of school board.
Okay, so tonight's work session topics are school funding overview, including the Cordova School District's 2022 budget, draft revenues and expenses, city in-kind services provided to the schools, and public access and use of school facilities. And I'll turn it over to School Board President Barb Jewell.
Thank you. And I want to say I really appreciate all of the people who showed up on this beautiful sunny evening to talk about school funding and the school budget. I certainly know that the school board appreciates the time, and we're really glad to have this opportunity to present a first look at the school budget for the following year. I think in the past there's been discussion that the council hasn't had information soon enough or in enough detail, that the school board has not had the opportunity to either ask questions or present information. So I really appreciate that we're doing this work session and that we have it now scheduled regularly throughout the year. So thank you for that. I also hope that we're going to present some information. Primarily the superintendent and the business manager will offer up the details of the information and review some of the information in the packet. I'm really hoping that the council members will take this opportunity to ask us any questions and tell us where you need more information or what will be helpful for you. I think these sessions offer both the school board and the council the opportunity to do a thorough, detailed planning process that might make all of our jobs easier and help us collaborate better in utilizing the resources for our students' education. I would like to ask if there are particular areas that any of the council members have that you want to make sure we go over, or questions, specific questions that you would like to see answered tonight.
Council? Any council items online? Councilman Meyer?
It's not so much a question, maybe more of a request. When school board particularly needs more funding in our budget, it would be nice if the city council and the school board can get on board with selling the idea in some way to pay for it to the community. A lot of times we get asked for more funding and need to come up with the way to pay for it, and sometimes we do, and sometimes there's a little pushback from the community about either raising taxes for it. That's primarily our way to raise revenue. So if we could kind of come together in selling the idea to the community or telling them why it's important, I think that would be helpful, because I know there's a need for more funding, and somehow our community needs to pay for it in some way or another. So that would be my only kind of comment right now.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, council?
Yes, Councilman Baylor.
Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, I guess you guys may have talked about this issue, but I've been approached by a couple people about more public use of the gyms after hours, basketball leagues, that sort of thing. I don't know if the board has discussed that, or if that's, if you put that issue to rest, or if there's an opening for some of that discussion for the community to use the school gyms more often.
Thank you for raising the question, and I think that that's in part the reason why number 3, public access and use of school facilities, is on our agenda this evening. I think there have been lots of questions, just like with any building in the city, of how to safely open and who can use it and when. So I think we're going to discuss that towards the end of this meeting.
Okay, I apologize. I'm having a little bit of trouble with my internet here, getting everything up. And you guys are coming in awfully softly, so I don't know if you can move closer to the mic or not. Thank you.
Sorry, Tom, I'm holding it, but maybe I'm not doing it right. I apologize.
Okay, other questions, council? Just to reiterate, Councilman Baylor, she mentioned that's part of why item 3 was on the agenda tonight, public access and use of school facilities and how to do that safely and so forth.
Thank you.
Okay, it doesn't sound like we have other questions.
Okay, so with that being the case, if I can turn it over to Christy and Alex to walk us a little bit through the packet.
Hi, this is Alex. Yeah, so just to get started, the conversation started, what we'd like to do is provide a brief overview of how funding occurs within the state, and specifically how the district receives revenue, and then how the city minimum and maximum calculations are determined. And so if you have questions during sort of the presentation, feel free to interrupt and ask us, but I think we'll probably move fairly quickly through this particular point so that there's enough time for questions and conversation, clarification, and so forth. And I'll turn the presentation over to Christy at this time.
Thank you. Am I close enough? Can you hear me okay? More? Is that better? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having us. So I'm going through this fairly brief presentation on education funding, and what we're doing is just giving you an overview of the calculation that the state does in order to come up with the funding that we're going to have in the next fiscal year. So this presentation is based on our current fiscal year, which is FY 2021. So a lot of the numbers in here are accurate and close to final numbers as far as the state's concerned. So there's a couple parts to the presentation. The first is going over the K-12 funding formula, and then the second piece will take a look at some historic information. So on the left is an example of our what we call the basic need calculation, and this is what we're going to go through the next several slides, and we're just going to break it down piece by piece. So there's kind of 3 sections that we'll talk about first. The first is student count and school size adjustment. The second is other adjustment factors, and then how that is funded when we get to that total number. So student count and school size adjustment. So the first is student count. And the presentation is going to jump a little bit back and forth, but you should be able to follow along in your PDF as well. So this is the section that identifies the student count, and this happens once a year in October, and we count the enrolled students over a 20-day count period. Hence the decimals. So if a student isn't there for the entire 20 days, they end up as a decimal in the system. Once the state accumulates all the data from all the school districts, they come up with this total number, and that is the starting or the base ADM for Cordova School District. And we have it split out by the high school and the elementary school. This year is a total of 262.3. So backing up, the second piece of this is our intensive count. So we just break this count out. These students are included in the numbers above in that ADM, but this amount is used in a calculation later on in the formula. So we just break that out so it's nice and visible. So then we have our school size adjustment, sort of the third piece here. This also goes by school. So we have an adjustment for the high school, which increases the ADM from 120.4 to 180.51. And that's based on the tier that base ADM is located in at 75 to 149 students. So there's a calculation that's behind that. And that increases the ADM based on the school size. We've done the same with the elementary school. So after the school size adjustment, we have 388.32 adjusted ADM.
And I would just add, Christy, that the ADM indicates average daily membership during that particular October count period. Okay, so that sometimes we get caught up in acronyms in education, but ADM, that just refers to the average daily membership during that count period.
Thank you. Yes, I do get caught up in my acronyms. All right, are there any questions about that first portion of the calculation?
So I have one. The special ed intensive, does that mean you have 10 special needs students?
10 intensive special needs students.
Okay. Yeah.
Correct.
And Councilmember Sherman, just for additional information, so the intensive students typically need a little bit more robust support. They might be working directly one-on-one or on a 3-to-1 ratio per student and a paraprofessional. So, and we have about 60 special education students in total across the district with varying needs, everything from just speech pathology needs to more intensive services and support.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so going back, we're now looking at other adjustment factors. So this is sort of the middle portion of that top half of the basic need calculation. So there are, this year, there are 6 factor adjustments. The hold harmless factor we're going to talk about first. That varies based on a trigger, whether or not we're eligible for that hold harmless provision. And this year, we are. FY21 is the year 1 of 3. And what triggers this is a significant reduction in that school size adjustment ADM from one year to the next. So we saw about an 11% reduction. The trigger is 5%. So we saw a really steep decline in that total ADM after the school size adjustment. So this is the state's way of helping us through a 3-year period. The first year, they fund 75% of that loss. The second year, they fund 50%, and the third year, 25%.
And let me add to that. So last year, our ADM was 324 students. And this year's ADM, you can see there, the initial sort of base is 262 students. So fairly significant. Now, we retain some of those in our correspondence program, but which has a different funding mechanism, but we did lose a number of students as well to other statewide correspondence programs. And then just with students graduating and other students coming in, sometimes it's not, you don't graduate 25 students and then get 25 students coming in. So sometimes that plays a factor as well in the ADM.
Okay. So in this case, the hold harmless factor is an addition to the ADM after the school size adjustment. The second factor is district cost. So there's also a multiplier of 1.234 added, applied to our ADM, and Anchorage has a district cost factor of 1, for example. So this is to help with some of the cost of services in the rural and off-road districts. So our factor is set in statute, again at 1.234. The next is our special needs factor. This doesn't include specifically any specific students. It's basically a 20% multiplier against our ADM to help assist with students with special needs. As Alex was mentioning earlier, sort of those 60 students that we have with varying needs throughout the district. There's a vocational technical factor, another multiplier, a smaller one, so that adds about 10 ADM to our adjustment, and this is to help offset costs related to the vocational and technical programs that we offer at the school district. And correspondence. So this is the distance education. As Alex was mentioning earlier, we had some students that moved from our brick and mortar school to the online environment. This year we had 26.38 of those students. So those students are not included above. This is where their funding comes in, and it comes in at 90%. So we take that 26.38 and that's a 90, and we get 90% funding for those. And the final adjustment is that intensive services factor. So this is where those 10 students that we labeled above come into play, and each student is given a factor of 13. So in our case, 13 times 10 is 130, and that is added on to the adjusted ADM. So our total adjusted ADM at that point is 812.93. So we went from 262 and a fraction to 812.93.
And that number is students, right? So we had 262 point some head count. And when you apply all of these formulaic factors to it, we end up getting, as part of our state entitlement, as if we had 812 students in the district in this case. Right? And from year to year, that number may change depending on what that starting average daily membership number is.
Thank you. Were there any other questions about those additional factors?
Council? Okay, not hearing any.
Okay, no problem. So the next section here has to do with our funding. And so we've got the base student allocation at $812.93. And the base student allocation is $59.30, and that is multiplied by our total adjusted ADM, which is $812.93. So that base student allocation is also set in statute. It was increased very slightly in 2017 and has not been increased since that time. So this is the factor that goes into the basic need total formula for our funding.
And I would add to that, so that particular number, the 5930, when you take into account the cost of inflation, it's roughly about the funding source that was being provided by the state in 1993. So just to provide some context for what that number is in today's goods and services, about 1993's value.
The next part of this is the basic need calculation and the basic need total. So if we take that 812.93 in our adjusted ADM and multiply it by the BSA, or the base student allocation, we end up with a basic need total of 4.8 million. That's comprised of several funding sources, including the required local effort, which we'll discuss in a little bit. There is a deduction for impact aid payments from the federal government, in addition to the quality schools to receive our projected state entitlement. So essentially here, what you're looking at is a required local effort of $877,000 by the city. That's the minimum. And then our state entitlement, what we're getting from the state for this year is just over 3.9 million. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Councilman Gleason.
What is that quality schools thing?
It's a very small additional grant that, as far as I'm concerned, it's been fairly automatic, and it's been about the same amount each year. But it's something that they have always added into the calculation when they look at their state entitlement.
As Christy mentioned, it's based on sort of your average daily membership. So that's about the number that we've gotten in recent years, as Christy said. It's really we have to provide a report at the end of each year, and really it's around school improvement efforts, I guess on a real broad sort of 30,000-foot view. There's not a lot of guidance from the department in terms of how those funds are used or for what purpose, but generally speaking, it can be around school improvement efforts.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
So now looking a little deeper into that local effort calculation. So as we mentioned, we actually start with a minimum required amount. And part of what goes into that is the full value determination for the prior calendar year. So in this case, it's the 2019 full value determination at just over 331 million, which was down from 2018, and it's back up again in 2020. Then the prior year basic need factors into that, as well as the projected basic need, which is a number that you see above. So these are factors that we use to calculate the minimum required local contribution. And you can see there, of those two comparative values, whichever is lesser is going to be the minimum required local contribution. So those do vary slightly from year to year. And then the next piece is our maximum allowable, which the calculation for that is actually towards an additional allowable local contribution, which is then added to the minimum required local contribution. And the total is the maximum allowable. So for FY21, the maximum allowable local contribution to the general operating fund is 1.989. Okay, were there any questions about the local contribution calculation?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Ellison.
just for clarifying, the in-kind counts towards the total maximum?
Yes, that's correct. Okay, so that completes the section that I have for K-12 formula, funding formula, and we can now take a look at some of the historic information. So I've broken this out into sort of basically 4 different slides. Historic local data, FY21 adopted revenue, and it's a pie chart. You'll see a pie chart for our expenses and then a multi-year expense comparison. So the first being the historic local contributions. And this goes back to 2013-14, so our FY14. And what you see in the green is the direct cash contribution made by the city. The blue is the in-kind contributions. And then the red is the difference between the both of those contributions and the maximum that was allowed in that year. So over the last several years, 2019-20 was the first year that the city has met the max or met the cap. Were there any questions on that slide before? All right. So next we'll look at our FY21 adopted budget revenue. Again, this is our general operating fund. So just to summarize, about 60% of our funding is from the state foundation money. The city in-kind contributions are about 2%. Direct contributions are closer to 30%. Then we have also TERS and PERS on behalf and all other revenue totaling just over 11%. Okay, we'll move to the expenses for the same year. Again, this is the year that we're currently operating in. So we have 80% of our expenses are allocated towards salaries and associated payroll costs. About 5% to supplies and services, 6% to utilities. And the last slide that I'll share is a multi-year expense comparison. So the top line here, that brown line, I've made a note. This is salaries and associated payroll costs. There was a pretty big jump in 2014-15 where we received additional on behalf monies from the state. So that was just a one-time deal to cover on behalf expenses, essentially. So outside of that, a lot of our other object codes, our other expenses have declined or remained very steady, and they're obviously year over year, there's a small increase in salaries and associated payroll costs. So that is the end of this presentation. If Alex wants to add any more to that.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. And we know that many of you likely have heard a lot of these terms or have seen information regarding how the district receives revenues from the state and locally, but hopefully it was a good refresher for the purpose of this conversation at least, to just help give another perspective on how those revenues are generated. Again, much of it is formulaic. All of it really is somehow related to statute, and the base student allocation of that $5,930 is something that's talked about at the legislative level near yearly, it seems. Sometimes they'll put that particular dollar amount into statute for a couple of years or multiple years, but it is something that seems to routinely come up during the course of the legislative sessions. So we're happy to take any questions about that information, or if you have any and want to jot down and get them to me at a later time, we'd be happy to provide those responses to the council and city manager.
Questions, council?
Mayor?
Councilman Allison.
Yeah, what's your best guess estimate on where your fund balance is going to be at the end of this fiscal year in June?
I'll let Christy answer that one, but one thing that I would say is when we look at the fund balance, or when we think about the fund balance, it's really important to understand that that is not entirely cash flow. As part of the district's fund balance, that includes inventory, and it also includes fuel. So short of liquidating assets, really, a lot of that, a good portion of that fund balance is not accessible as cash, although there is a considerable amount of that. So I'll maybe let Christy answer our best guess as to what this year's fund balance may look like. Next year's is a little bit different picture.
Yeah, we're estimating about $630,000 in total fund balance. That's inclusive of the areas that Alex just mentioned. This fiscal year, we started with about $780,000, $600,000. So we're going down to 630.
And again, statutorily, we're only able to keep 10% of what our expenditures are in the fund balance. So we have to consistently and constantly monitor that to make sure that, again, we don't have revenues in excess of what that 10% allowable carryover in the fund balance is.
Helen?
I was just curious if you are aware of any COVID relief monies that are specifically dedicated to education that might be coming your way and how that will impact your budget next year.
So we're still standing by as to sort of the, I guess, the third round of funding. So we received in the CARES Act allocation about $108,000 in the CRSSA or the CRRSA. We got about that same amount, $108,000. And, you know, a lot of those funds were directed towards, so we had a drastic increase in correspondence school students, and statutorily, we have to provide support to those particular students. And that comes in the form of monthly contact with parents who are primarily doing the instruction, check-ins, and feedback and whatnot. So we used a portion of those funds to be able to fill a position related to that additional staff member that we needed for this year. The numbers are still out as to what the correspondence enrollment may look like, and so we may be dedicating some funds or needing to dedicate some funds to keep that position in place to be able to, again, statutorily support those students. I'm not aware of any additional funds specifically for schools that are coming this way, although, you know, we hear a little bit of information that there may be some additional funds related to COVID testing supplies and health and safety sort of supplies within the district. But I think a lot of the federal funds right now can be used for a wide variety of things, and we'll just be monitoring for what those revenues may look like for us.
I was wondering, could Christy tell us what we're looking at in our projected budget, what our reserve budget is looking like for the following year? Is that appropriate?
Yeah, I can, we actually included a draft of our budget, and it's still under discussion, but it's on page 27 of your packet. So this is the base fund, the base budget, I should say, is that first column that you see here. We've got resources on the top, which include an estimated beginning fund balance of the $630,000 I mentioned. And then if you move down the sheet, we have requirements or expenditures of $6,625,000 and an additional $299 in transfers to other funds. So that leaves our ending fund balance at $99,000 negative. And this is where those prepaids, inventory, and impact aid come in. So we take that 99 and we deduct those other items, which would actually leave the fund balance subject to that 10% limitation at a negative amount. So we're looking at some other scenarios that could help increase our ending fund balance without significantly impacting our educational and instruction programs. So in the middle, there are 3 columns with some different ideas, different scenarios that we've put together. The first scenario has to do with an adjustment in our athletic director position. The second column has to do with removing items that we've identified as priority 2 items. We use 3 priorities in our budgeting process. So those priority 2 items are things that the teachers and staff have identified as they'd be really, really great to enhance their educational program. but they're not absolutely required. And that third column is a priority 3 items, which are more of the wish list items. But if we were to remove those from that base budget, that's what that scenario budget would look like. And then the final column is if we combined all those 3 scenarios together, we took out the AD position, we removed priority 2 items and priority 3 items. So the ending fund balance in that final scenario is $206,000, leaving us with $37,000, subject to that 10% limitation by the state. I hope that was not too confusing.
Yeah, and just a little bit of additional background there. So that base column that Christy mentioned, that first one, so that includes, when we're doing our budget, we ask the teachers, what do you need for the classroom, right? And that's where sort of the needs versus wants conversation comes to fruition. We say, what do you absolutely need to run your programs in the classrooms? And teachers create lists, and they put values to that. They do the research and find out how much supplies and materials and whatever they need for the classroom. And then we say, go ahead and prioritize those things as 1, 2s, and 3s, right? The 1s are the absolute must-haves to run a real quality program. The 2s are, again, as Christy mentioned, those are kind of the would be nice to enhance programs, and then the priority 3s are those wish list types of things. So that base includes all of those things. And then this particular page, it also includes our activities director position. And as you move across the right, you deduct from the base what those expenses would be. So that first AD adjusted, that's removing the AD position from the budget. Priority 2 is removing the priority 2 items from the budget. Priority 3, and then that last column is removing each of those 3 scenarios from the base budget.
One more question for Christy. And so what kind of number do you like to see in the reserve budget? And can you explain some of the expenses that we incur or the district incurs, and we need to have a fund balance to use those monies to continue operations?
Yeah, so I do prefer a fund balance of closer to $400,000 to $500,000. And there are some reasons for this. We have several grants of several $100,000, and our general fund, the cash available in our general fund is the cash that we use to front money for the expenses on those grants. So depending on how long it takes for us to receive reimbursement for any of those individual grants, and sometimes that can take 6 months after we've spent the money. So having a healthy fund balance in our general fund helps us to pay for those things that we need to for the grants that we've accepted, and to provide services to students in those areas. That's probably the biggest.
Oh, and I would add to that, some of those grants that we receive fund a speech language pathologist, fund a physical therapist, fund an occupational therapist, all of whom we need to bring from outside the district, because those services just maybe until recently haven't readily been available for our students. And what drives that is a special education students for those particular 3 positions that I offer, that I mentioned, their individual education program or plan. So literally in those plans, you can see that a student requires 45 minutes of instruction or support with one of these providers X number of times per week or X number of times per month. And we are federally required to implement those plans as they're written. And again, those expenses, while they're reimbursable through the grants that we get, sometimes take months and months and months. And it's really important for us to have an adequate cash flow in that fund balance to be able to, when we get invoiced at the end of a visit or, within 30 days of services provided, be able to pay those so that the people continue to come back and fulfill those services for students. And we have other grants that help to supply or to pay for positions or partial positions that we have within the district as well, our paraprofessionals and support staff in particular.
Councilman Gleason, and if you can use the mics as close as you can for those online things.
So I'm going to back up just a little bit. So what do school sports look like? Have you heard for this next school year? Because I'm assuming pretty much everybody's going to be going back to school regular. So are you hearing that there's going to be school sports, traveling and whatnot?
Well, that's our intent, right? And we're sort of in this sort of holding pattern again to see what the virus is going to do and how it's going to impact all of us, just like what it did this year. But our plan is to operate school in a regular fashion in terms of a school day. We're still getting feedback from community members and parents and whatnot. And so that's our plan in moving forward. Right now, I think a fair number of our high school age students who are eligible for the vaccine have taken that up. So that's certainly a plus in terms of helping us with our operations and some of those decisions. So, it was a hard year on all of us, particularly our student athletes who really benefit from traveling and competing and participating. And we sure want to do what we can to make that happen next year for kids.
But you haven't heard anything concrete or anything yet?
Not at a state level. I mean, I think that some of the state events that you saw happening or partially happening here in March, I would guess that the Activities Association is going to plan to move forward with hosting those events starting in the fall. Our current activities director has been scheduling 4 seasons, volleyball and cross country and all of the activities that our kids normally compete in. So we have been building schedules in the event that that travel is a real possibility for kids.
Thanks.
I was just going to mention one other little factor there. You notice the district cost factor within that, 1.234. One of the things that takes into consideration is ferry travel. We don't have ferry travel anymore, so thus it's increasing our more money for sports because we're going to start flying all the kids, right? That's another, so we're taking a hit there too as well. And one thing I'll just mention, Alex mentioned that we're back to 1993 levels. I don't know if everybody caught that one in funding. That's 30 years ago, the funding levels. One of the things Alex mentioned, the rate of inflation. That 5930 number, the base student allocation, has increased little over 8% in 10 years. Inflation has gone up 27%. Health insurance has gone up 326%. And our funding is flat, so we're getting reduced funding. And the city funding is based on the state funding, so it's all decreasing. There's less and less dollars going to the classroom.
Okay, I think I have this on right. I know that there are a couple of other items on the agenda, and I'm looking at the time, and I believe you all have some other work that you have to do. So I guess I would offer for one last chance for any questions or areas for further discussion or consideration.
Just wondering, can you give us the timeline of when you are hoping that your budget will be presented to council for approval for next fiscal year?
So at our regular board meeting in May, we'll have the board approve, I think is the term, approve the budget or approve the superintendent's recommendation for the budget. Then we'll have a 30-day period in which people can comment on that and send us information. And then at June, the board would adopt the budget, formally adopt the budget. And then we would bring that to either city council as a whole. I know, and I'm not quite clear the process of on your end how that happens if the city manager just signs sort of the cover page of what we need to submit to the state by July the 15th. But that would be the timeline in which we would be ready to bring that information to you in June.
I think typically this does come before council, and we would then plan for the first council meeting in June to accommodate your needs for state reporting. So that's good information, so we'll plan that way.
Okay, Barb, Chairman, thank you for acknowledging the clock and the presentation. And we do have to fold into a public hearing. Maybe I'd suggest on these other two items, if you could just maybe give small bites at either in the school district board report during council meeting or audience comments ahead of time, if either this meeting or next one, and especially maybe on activities, if you have kind of a brief overview there. So, okay, so any last questions, council? Okay, we'll adjourn the joint work session with school board.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Tammy.
I just wanted to.
Say, Tammy, could you get up on the mic so council can hear it online?
Okay, I just wanted to kind of address what Melina was saying about the, when we come from more funding. I don't think we've ever really come for more than we asked for to begin with, but we've only been given so much. So then if we come back and say it didn't work, we couldn't do it. And so that's what we're actually coming back to ask for is our original amount. But I don't think that we've ever come forward and said, we can't do it. We unless there was, something with the facilities like the gym floor was a big one. But I don't think, it's usually in regards to our first original budget.
Yeah, I guess I'll just clarify a little bit. It's not, I think it's, excuse me, I think it's hard because our budget years are so opposite that sometimes things get just a little difficult. And I guess I just kind of meant that if we do try to raise more funding to fund everything in the city and including the schools, maybe we can put our heads together as the school board and the city of how to fund that, or just the communication to the citizens that, we might need to be raising some monies, but it's to help fund our schools, our bidarchy, just other activities is, I guess, just what I meant by it. Nothing too concrete.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just take a minute recess here to kind of get reorganized. Someone's called in. Okay, I'll call the City Council public hearing of April 21st, 2021 to order, 6:55. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here?
Tom Baylor,
Here.
Kathy Sherman,
Here.
Jeff Guard. Did he say here?
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer is absent, David Allison,
Here.
and David Gleason.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Okay, the first item is ordinance 1195. That's an ordinance of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending Cordova Municipal Code Chapter 3.10, Conflicts of Interest, to update conflict of interest declaration processes, incorporate the common law rule of necessity that permits conflicted officials to vote when necessary, and defining substantial financial interests and official actions, and amending Cordova Municipal Code Chapter 18.90, Historic Preservation Commission, and Cordova Municipal Code Chapter 3.52, Advisory Parks and Recreation Commission, to streamline conflict of interest commission requirements and updating formatting and language. The other item on the public hearing is ordinance 1196, and that's an ordinance of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending the 2021 city budget and authorizing the transfer of $100,000 from the General Reserve Fund, known as the Permanent Fund, to the Governmental Capital Projects Fund number 401 to upgrade and provide security to the city's impound lot. And the call-in number for the public to testify on the public hearings is 253-6202. It's area code 907-253-6202. Is there any public testimony in the room? Do we have any callers? Okay, I'll just take an opportunity for a minute to those councilmen online. We have Zachary Smith with the Cordova Times here, Police Chief Nate Taylor, Public Works Director Sam Greenwood, and Andrew helping with IT, right? And City Clerk and the rest of City Council. And Manager Helen. We had scheduled a 15-minute public hearing, but we're actually just 2 minutes from the regular meeting, so I'll just leave the mic open for a minute and see if any calls come in. That number again was 253-6202.
Do I call back? If no one calls, I'll hold it.
That call-in number again is 253-6202. Okay, do we have any, don't have any callers yet? Last call for any public testimony in the room. Helen, did you have any comments you wanted to add? Okay. All right, seeing no public testimony for the public hearing, I'll adjourn the public hearing. Okay, I'll call the regular city council meeting of April 21st, 2021 to order at 7 p.m. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
Tom Baylor,
Here.
Kathy Sherman,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer is absent, David Allison,
Here.
and David Gleason.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Okay, thank you. And then Susan, were we going to have Holly call
I
in?
think she just did.
Holly, is that you?
Yes, please.
Okay, council, just by way of explanation before you approve the regular agenda, I was contacted by the Native Village of EAC last week. You, council, had given me direction to kind of keep in touch with NVE to get an update on the disposition of health services and their goals and so forth. They've been working very diligently on that and had consultants in town and had kind of converged on several options that they wanted to discuss with council. I didn't have a lot of time to craft that in a way to make sure that we were staying legal and transparent for the community, so just pick some verbiage. I did consult, and I want council to know that I generally consult with the vice mayor, especially on items like this and getting them on the agenda and kind of working together to develop approach that gives council time to consider items and so forth. But there were some concerns about the wording on the executive session to make sure we stay within legal parameters. So Susan and I talked through those with Holly today, make sure that we're maintaining a separation between council duties and responsibilities and the city code authorizations of the Health Services Advisory Authority and their responsibilities. And so Holly, I'll turn it over to you if you had any comments or suggestions on the executive session agenda item.
Sure. I mean, I would change the language. One of the things about your code and the state statute is it requires your language to be as specific as possible without violating the very basis for the executive session. And so our topic was a little bit broad. So and Susan, I don't know if you want me to make a recommendation regarding language or if you want to.
I think they should probably move to approve it first, and then Holly will help us make the amendment.
Okay. Sounds like an orderly
Move to
approach.
approve the agenda.
Second.
Have a motion, Allison, second, Gleason, to approve the agenda. And Holly, a suggestion?
Yes, the language I would suggest is presentation of proprietary NVE information to the council regarding NVE grant opportunities and options for collaboration between the city and NVE in the provision of community medical services. And that's CMC 314030A3.
What? 314-030. Oh, so it's for number 3, matters which by law, municipal charter, or code are required to be confidential. Okay, so she's going to give me that in writing at some point because I didn't get that.
Yeah.
But if someone will move that amendment and
I was
then we
waiting for you, hopefully.
Okay. Or if you guys are okay with it being amended that way?
Yeah, if you need someone to move to amend it to what Holly said, that's what I'll do.
Okay.
Yeah, second it, to what Holly said.
Okay, so have a motion, Meyer, and a second, Sherman, to amend to your motion, Councilman Meyer.
Listen to the lawyers.
To your second, Councilman Sherman.
I I'd like to have it read back once we get it, but I'm in favor of it.
Okay, I'll just go through the list for discussion. Councilman Allison,
No discussion.
Councilman Schaefer is
Not here.
absent. Okay, Councilman Gleason,
No discussion.
Councilman Baylor,
No comment.
Councilman Guard,
Favor of the amendment.
Okay, Holly, could you just restate that before they vote on the amendment? And thank you, that was very clear and exactly the conversation that I had with NVE and their goal in the executive session.
Great. Yes, it is presentation of proprietary NVE information to City Council regarding NVE grant opportunities and options for collaboration between the city and NVE in the provision of community medical services. It references the executive session, code provision, matters which by law, city charter, or ordinance are required to be confidential.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
So on the amendment, Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
and Ann Schaefer is absent. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, Councilman Allison, to your motion to approve the agenda as amended now.
Call for the question.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
So on approval of the agenda, Tom Baylor,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer is absent. David Allison,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
and Kathy Sherman.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, the agenda is approved as presented, and Holly will also be joining in the executive session, as will Susan and myself, and then city council, but just structurally, that will be all that will participate in the executive session to maintain that separation between city council responsibilities and authorities and CCMCs. So, regular agenda, we have disclosures of conflicts of interest and ex parte communications. Does council have Councilman Meyer?
Under the consent calendar, item 9, the protest for liquor license for the reluctant. I can bring that up at the consent calendar, but I would like it to be removed. I have a conflict there.
Okay, we'll set aside item 9 and move that to, let's see, item,
Well, she's just declaring the conflict now. We can do that when we get to consent calendar, or now. That's fine.
okay. Any other conflicts to declare, council, or ex parte communications? Okay, hearing none. Communications by and petitions from visitors, guest speakers. Do we have a incident management team or COVID-19 update?
I don't know.
This is Hannah Sanders. I'm available. I don't have a significant update, really no changes. We have been continuing the collaborative vaccine clinics. Signups have slowed down. We're excited the state's going to allow us to offer vaccines to people that are visiting in the community, and I'm here for questions.
Okay, Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, Hannah, it's Dave. Just curious, it seems like everybody that wants a vaccine has gotten one. And I'm just curious your feelings on that. Do you feel like we vaccinated everybody that wants it, and the people that don't want it, you know, they're not going to ask to get vaccinated? So I'm just curious how you feel about where we're at.
Yeah, I feel like we're really close. We're at that point where everybody's been offered. A lot of those people have only started the vaccine process, so it takes another 6 weeks for them to be fully immunized. But yes, we are at that point, or very close to it.
Okay, so my second question is there any chance you're ready to recommend getting rid of the mask rule? Because I feel like if we're there, nothing's really going to change between now and June. You know, when we were originally.
We've had this discussion several times in the medical response team and with the entire medical community in Cordova. The consensus has been to get us into that kind of end of May period so that we have those people that have just initiated the vaccination process. Our recommendation is not necessarily mandate versus not mandate. We're going to continue to recommend CDC guidelines, which are when you're in public indoor spaces with non-household members, they still do recommend mask wearing. That's a best practice. So the medical team will continue to recommend that as a best practice. But certainly in terms of City Council deciding to step back those mandates, now that we have people able to get vaccinated if they so choose, I think that would be, we're getting close to that point for you guys to make that recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, council? Okay, thank you, Hannah. So now we have audience comments regarding agenda items. And I'll just remind those online, you can call in to testify at 253-6202, and then testimony here in the room. Go ahead. If you could just state your name for the record.
Barb Jewell, mile 2.2 Whiteshed Road, testifying as an individual Cordova community member. I want to speak to the executive session that was just the topic of an amendment to the agenda, and I appreciate the clarification of what that executive session topic is. On the published agenda, it just said joint venture and did not indicate what the topic actually was, which is of concern for me. As you know, I've spoken several times to this body that the conversation about how to organize healthcare services in Cordova has represented a lack of transparency that I don't think is in our community's best interest. And so to be having this again in executive session and not specifically identified on the agenda, again, looks like a lack of transparency. I'm concerned that planning for healthcare and the organization of the hospital appears to be taking place behind closed doors and away from public scrutiny, even though the topic is one that not only significantly affects public health and city infrastructure, but also involves large amounts of city dollars. I'm concerned that the conversation will not include hospital administrators or board members, the people who have the most information about healthcare administration. Past history in Cordova indicates that not involving healthcare administrators and content area experts has led to significant financial losses for Cordova. The giveaway of the FQHC designation and the delay of purchasing electronic healthcare systems are two examples of decisions that either did not include or disregarded the advice of healthcare experts and resulted in the loss of millions of dollars in revenue for the community. Over the last year, I believe that the current healthcare administrators from both organizations and their boards have demonstrated not only their commitment to the health of Cordovans, but also their capacity to provide high quality, accessible healthcare under the most exacting of circumstances. It seems like they've earned a seat at the table, and they can't have one in an executive session conversation. It's worth noting that the hospital has operated in the black for the last 2 months. The fact is not due entirely to COVID relief funds, but also the fact that we have administrators who've collaborated with healthcare organizations and improved the delivery of healthcare services, billing, reimbursement, and revenue tracking systems. I'm not naive enough to think that our hospital or the healthcare services can operate in the black always. However, as I've stated before, I believe that we as a community should be willing to invest in our healthcare systems, and this should be a public discussion, not behind closed doors. I may have shared this before, but when my family was considering moving to Cordova, I, of course, did my research, and there were 3 things that led us to move here. The first was the strong school system and educational outcomes. The second was the excellent youth programs offered by the City Recreation Center, and the third was access to health care. I felt safe seeing that there was a choice of clinics in a hospital. I'm not against any individual healthcare organization, and I can think of multiple ways that Elanca and CCMC can work together to strengthen our healthcare system. I would also offer that a tenet of capitalism is that competition promotes quality, fair prices, and accessibility. We have more than one grocery store, more than one hardware store, more than one cannery, more than one restaurant. Under the circumstances, there's no emergency regarding healthcare services. We have time to make decisions about our healthcare services. There are healthcare dollars available through multiple funds that can be utilized to address several shovel-ready projects that have been identified, and I urge the council to engage in a more transparent and thorough review of the options that we have to ensure quality, accessibility, and affordable healthcare in Cordova. The currently listed executive session does not, in my opinion, meet the standards of necessity, transparency, or good public administration. Thank you for your time and letting me come and speak to you about this once again.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
You can tell if someone's calling in from there. Okay. So thank you. And I'll just for the record, I'll mention that poor choice of language was mine. And actually, so the joint venture is a term. It's a program that NVE actually applied for. So I didn't mean to imply that there's a joint venture between NVE and the city of Cordova. It's just something that NVE had applied for, and it wasn't awarded, but that's why I chose that language. So do we have a call? Okay, we don't have anyone calling in for audience comments online. And so the next item is chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions. And I'll start with CCMC Authority Board. Dr. Sanders.
Hi, thank you. And Barb, kind of stole my thunder on this one. Yeah, the hospital's posted our second month of having positive cash flow. This positive cash flow for the last 2 months has not been due to CARES funding, although certainly being able to pay off some of our historic liabilities has helped us. But we have made significant changes to our billing practices and looked at our delivery of services, and that has really helped us to be able to operate in a more efficient way. I got the opportunity this weekend to meet with the Special Assistant to the Governor, Mr. Bill Thomas, and talk to him about some of those shovel-ready projects. With the CARES funding, we were able to update a lot of our equipment for direct patient care. The hospital certainly still has numerous problems with our facility being an old facility and not having a lot of money to be able to rehabilitate it. So we had a great opportunity to discuss some of those things. I am here for questions, but that is all I have for you today.
Questions, council? Any questions online, council? Okay, thank you, Hannah. School board representative. Up for a second bite, Barb? Third bite?
All right, so school board chair, Barb Jewell. And I appreciate the council's willingness to understand that people wear different hats. The one thing, there are a couple of things in terms of board administration that I wanted you to know. We are looking at our school calendar. It's a little bit later than usual just because we are trying to take into consideration current circumstances and, quite frankly, the lessons that we've learned this year about things that work better than some of the things we're doing. So we're trying to incorporate all of that and get a lot of feedback from staff and students and families about what we want school to look like next year. So we will be considering that calendar in May, and we'll get as much information out to the public as we can, because I know people try to make plans around that calendar. As we discussed in our work session, you saw the draft of our budget. I will share that it's the scariest budget I've seen in my time on the school board. And it's disappointing in light of the fact that there were some goals we had in terms of improving instruction that we probably are not going to get to meet, particularly around pre-K and some of the other literacy goals, as well as expanding some of our career and technical education pathways. So I'm disappointed about that. And I know that every organization is struggling with less revenue. So it's going to be a hard year. And we, of course, will continue to keep the council appraised of that budget process and the outcomes. In our work session, there were a couple of topics that we didn't get to, and the mayor asked me to just do a quick overview, so I wanted to take this opportunity. You do have a memo in the packet that was provided at the work session from the city manager about in-kind donations. And in-kind donations, again, for as long as I've been on the board, has been a touchy subject because there's lots of different ways to calculate it, right? So I think that the piece that we wanted to just make sure and that there's perhaps future discussion about is how this is calculated, given that the school district pays for property insurance out of our general fund money that's separate from this property insurance that's listed here. And there are many schools that have thought about this, but the property insurance on the buildings is an expense that the city would have regardless of who was in them. And then the tenant also has additional property insurance. So I'm hoping that we'll take a look at that and think carefully about where we consider that in terms of a city contribution. And that's why that was on the agenda this evening. Again, it's been an issue since I've been on the board, but maybe something to take a look at. The other piece was the use of school facilities, and we included our policy and the form that people use to request facility usage. This was developed actually based on a request from the city to standardize how we allowed access of the buildings and also that we charge for it. So I think this was put in a number of years ago. And certainly we were restricting access at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, just like everyone was. It was part of the mitigation measures for safety and all of that. But I think there's been an idea that the buildings are closed to the public, which is not actually true. Students are certainly going in there. There are student activities happening in the evenings, in the gyms, and in the classrooms. We only have so much space, and student activities take up a great deal of it. However, there's always been a pathway for requesting facility usage. But I think because of everyone's worry about closed buildings and not wanting to overstep boundaries, they may have forgotten that there's a process for accessing it. One of the things is that, of course, we're asking everyone to abide by mitigation measures that all buildings are required to do. Some groups are okay with that, some are not. And so there's been a bit of a holdup there. So while I think there's been some verbal requests to say, can we use the building? Nobody's actually, to my knowledge, gone through putting in the request that's been our standard process. I think that process has gotten a little lost and convoluted in the whole pandemic piece, which is understandable. So I would encourage folks to, do the request process, talk to the office about what mitigation measures are required and what time is actually available, because again, student activities are using those spaces quite a bit. And they, of course, have to come first in terms of the building use. I hope that answers some of the questions that there have been. And I encourage people to reach out to the superintendent if they have additional questions.
Any questions, council? Thank you. That's a great reminder, because I know that you have that. That calendar is quite full, even a year out in advance almost. And so the open spots are the ones that are available. So, all right, thank you for adding those items. And we don't have a student council representative report. Councilman Baylor, did you have anything to add on PISWAC?
No, I did not. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just mention that there is a serves drill scheduled for this upcoming week, and there's going to be some activity there. So, okay, now the consent calendar. A conflict was noted for item 9. So are there any other items council would like to set aside? Okay, we'll move 9 to, let's see, council action. Down to new and miscellaneous business. Susan, just put it on item.
Before 23.
Okay, we'll make it item 23A. Okay, hearing none. The consent calendar includes Resolution 42117, authorizing officers as check signers for vouchers, notes, and other documents. Resolution 04-21-18A, approving a final plat at Thorn Lake Estates. Resolution 04-21-19A, adopting a historic building survey plan and attached to the comprehensive plan. A council action to waive right to protest liquor license renewal for OK Restaurant, council confirmation of the Cordova Volunteer Fire Department 2021 officer elections, and minutes of the April 17th, 21 council regular meeting, and per charter section 28 Cordova Municipal Code 3.12.022 recordation of excused absence of Councilman Guard from the April 7th regular meeting. Roll call vote, please.
Sorry, those minutes are April 7th. I just.
Okay, I was so I thought, woo, that's a big jump.
No.
April 7th, correct, as corrected. Roll call.
On the consent calendar,
Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment on, the item 6 on the Thorn Lake Estate. Just want to say once again, the city planner and the planning commission did an excellent job giving us all the background information we needed and explained everything and why they were doing that. So that is so helpful, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the consent calendar, council? Okay, roll call vote.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer is absent, David Allison,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
and Melina Meyer.
Yes.
The consent calendar is approved.
Okay, so we have the minutes approved in that consent calendar, no bids to consider. So reports of officers, mayor's report, and it seems to be harder and harder to get a written report in. But so just a verbal report update. Representative Stutes, been keeping in fairly regular touch there. Again, she is the Speaker of the House. That carries a lot of clout. And in particular, there's more available for capital funding this year than originally anticipated, and some other changes in the state budget that give us access to some resources. A lot of these appropriations and priorities are going to be established legislatively. That means we're in a position to collaborate with our representative and make sure that we have our capital improvements list in front of her and that those are the priorities we want, and take advantage of that representation, I guess. And that was the recommendation from Bill Thomas in his visit. The governor's special representative had an opportunity to meet with him, and also the city manager and so forth. For my part, my takeaway from that was, again, work with Representative Stutes, and it's great that Bill Thomas was our representative and understands that process and the kind of advocacy we have right now. And it's very, very strong. So appreciate him coming to the community on the governor's behalf. And also one of his goals was to make sure we understand that there's going to be some significant funding available for businesses that were impacted by the downturn in the cruise ship industry. We did have 2 cruise ships come the year before last. We had 4 scheduled to come this year, so and we got none. So we do have businesses that were impacted. It's just very hard to measure, and so appreciate Kathy Renfelt, our Chamber of Commerce director, participating in those discussions and working with Helen to our city manager to think around how we might package and have that conversation with our business community. We did have the Aurora start service today. Appreciated the citizens that showed up and in support of that. And we do have a very good summer schedule. I appreciate the school board's comments in our work session earlier about how that impacts their budget and how winter service is important. So I think it's incumbent on us. We asked the governor and the Marine Highway System to fix the Aurora. They did. They put it in the shipyard, they fixed it, and they put it into service in the Sound as one of the 2 options, either Fast Ferry or the Aurora. Anything we can do to utilize that ferry during the summer and advocate for keeping it here for the winter schedule, that's our path to getting our economy upright. And so it'd be good for us to keep that conversation open and happening. The other items were, I did reach out to Well, actually, the governor's representative, John Moeller, reached out to me, and he has been appointed as a Denali Commission co-chair. And that is a funding source that we have not utilized as well as we should during the community, here in the community. And two of their priorities are healthcare, rural healthcare particularly, and fuel tank upgrades. So that was one that School Board Chairman Jewell had approached me about some months ago. That was a big capital expense at CCMC, and that is exactly the funding resource there. So again, John Mueller is the governor's representative that's been working with us on the ferries and fisheries, but now he's been appointed as the co-chair to that Denali Commission, a significant funding stream. So I appreciate him reaching out to us and asking how he can help make that program better. And that's right off the top there. Their two priorities, healthcare and fuel tank upgrades are things. So I wanted to mention those conversations. And then the fun and exciting one is the Japanese film crews from NTV that were here in Cordova the last 3 or 4 days. Really appreciate our processors, 60 Degrees North and Trident Seafoods, opening their plants for tours, giving them tours of our battery energy storage system and our hydroelectric facilities, meeting with citizens and filming some of the citizens that are taking eco-friendly approaches. And that'll air for a full 5 minutes on primetime national Japanese television at 6 p.m. their time tomorrow. And that's 1 a.m. in the morning our time. And I'll make sure that they are going to send us links to the recorded feed so that we can circulate that to all the organizations. There was no chance to capture it all, but they did fold in some of the oil spill impacts and how that works in our DNA and thinking about paths to the future. And they had a chance to tour and get some footage of our museum and the oil spill displays there. And I think that bodes well for EVOS investing in this facility and having that available for visitors. It's a large visitors audience and a strong trade partner with Alaska, and just so excited that we had that opportunity to showcase our community to that audience. And again, to talk about, if not fold in directly, but to talk about the social value that comes from our fisheries and our economy here, and the great school systems and healthcare that we have access to. So a really great way to showcase our community directly and indirectly, and get them out to, gosh, we saw moose, deer on the beach, coyotes, sea lions, sea otters. So, and then of course the fantastic scenery and the fantastic weather that we had. So really looking forward to that and sharing that with the community. That's all I had, unless there's any questions. Okay, manager's report.
Thank you. First off, I want to let you know that Dean Baugh, who's been rescuing us from our financial misfortunes, is online, and I want to allow him the opportunity to speak directly to his financial report that he's included in this packet through the end of 2020. He's actively working on first quarter 2021, and we'll have that for you at the next meeting. But I know we are overdue for a financial report, and I thought it'd be useful for all of you if you had questions to have Dean online. So Dean, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Great.
Speaking to you from sunny, dark Oregon right now, but it's nice down here.
Well,
so I've got the December financial report in the works. I'm almost done with the month of February. I hope I'll start the March bank rec tomorrow and be able to get a first quarter report out by next week. That's kind of my goal. Then I get back over and start working back on the audit. We have the auditors coming the end of June, the last 2 weeks, the 21st and 28th, those 2 weeks. I'll be up there the week of the 28th to hopefully finish up the audit with them and do some training with Barb. So when we get down to the numbers, understand the numbers you have are preliminary, because as we go through the audit, we roll things back that come in 2021 There are some things that are going to roll back. There's a lot of adjustments that still have to be made to the 2020 numbers to get final numbers. So these are just preliminary numbers. As you can see, 2020 wasn't a good year. You know, things came in lower than in 19, which is to be expected with everything that's going on. Hopefully, when they finish up with the FEMA audit and FEMA stuff, that the numbers will look better. General fund, it's still bad. It was actually negative at the end of the year last year. I think the last 2 years I've done this, we've had between $500,000 and $700,000 in the general fund at year end. We really should have closer to $2 or $3 million in the general fund to get through the spring. But I think the negative number, the big part comes from, if you look back at, when we get back to the detail, you'll see the state school debt reimbursement. Well, they just stopped. We had budgeted $400,000. I think you got like $75,000. So that came way under what it usually does. And then taxes came in lower than usual, which makes sense since everybody stayed home. They weren't shopping. They weren't doing a lot of stuff. Excuse me. So I will say the city does have sufficient cash in their reserves for cash flow. It's not like you're going to be bouncing any checks. When you look at it, there's, I think there's like $10 million, let me look, no, $5 million in your sweep account. You know, the problem is a bunch of that is in enterprise reserves, reserve accounts. So if you start doing a bunch of projects in your reserve accounts, then your cash flow will go away. But right now you have plenty of money for cash flow. If you look back at the city council, cash report, you'll see there's a big negative number in the checking account and the payroll account. Do not worry about those. Those numbers, that just means Barb wrote checks on the last day of the year, and the bank didn't roll money out of the sweep account to cover it, because those are what are called zero balance accounts. And she writes checks, they move money in to cover it. So those numbers can be positive, negative any day, just depending on if we've got checks in or we wrote checks. So don't worry about that 214 negative or the 5,000 negative in payroll. Those are just kind of a normal day-to-day thing. Like you say, you have $5 million in your sweep account. If we go down, there's $10 million right now in the permanent fund. Going down, you know, we're still holding a negative number in the enterprise, the water and sewer enterprise funds. I think they're about the same as they were last year this time, so they haven't got any worse or any better. If you go down to the next page, I think it's page 25 of the report. It shows that taxes came in about $500,000 lower than projected, and then the state debt reimbursement came in almost $400,000 less than expected. So that's kind of where your big thing was. You know, overall revenues came in $1.2 million lower than what was projected. Again, with what was going on last year, that's not unusual. The good thing is the departments, they actually kept their budgets down and didn't spend, and they came about $671,000 under budget. So they did a good job trying to control their expenses throughout the year. The next set of pages there shows the overall city. It shows the overall city had a $2 million over budget expense. But if you look up there, the COVID-19 in Fund 333, that was never budgeted. So that shows like $3 million over. If that would have been put into the budget, then you would be $1 million the other direction. So that would have been, that's good. Same thing with expenses. the two things that really put you over budget down there were COVID-19 and a harbor project. But COVID-19, you got that grant, and there was never any budget put in. And then the harbor project, I know in 2019, we budgeted $200,000 in that fund for this harbor project, and it looks like that money never got rolled over here, and then there was $75,000 extra spent there. So really, overall, even the expenses actually came out within budget, you know, once you take into account the ones that weren't budgeted. And then I put some 2019 numbers there just for you to compare against. Then I did again, I added in the debt service. So this year you've got about $1.8 million in debt service. That includes 2 bonds that were paid off in 2020, and there'll be one more bond, school bond, that'll be paid off in 21. So your debt service, right, there is, your debt service payments will be about the same for the next 6-7 years. And then there's a great big drop off after 2028 when some great big bonds get paid off and you go way down on your debt service. We do have one water bond, or the water bond, the LT2 bond. It's like $2.1 million that will be completed in 21, and they'll start doing bond payments on that more than likely in 22. And that Sam did plan on that. She was waiting to finish one debt payment this year to start the next one, so she wasn't making both bond payments at the same time. So one went off, she'll bring that other one on next year. So that was kind of planned the way that was happening. So those are the numbers. Does anybody have any questions? Anything?
Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, back on your cash allocations, the COVID relief grant, do we actually have the COVID relief grant, the 551,000, we actually have that?
Let me look.
What page do you want?
So the COVID
On
relief.
page 24 on the cash allocations. There's a 333 COVID relief grant of $551,371. I thought we were out of our COVID relief money, unless this is a.
Yeah, well, that was just saying at 12/31 there was still $500,000 in cash sitting there. There were some bills that still had to be paid. Let me go down here lower. Oops, where is it? It shows down below that you, at year end, you had spent $2.9 million, and it looks like you had $3.44 million in the grant. So there was still like $500,000 that they had to spend at year end, according to the numbers that have been posted.
We had obligated the funds, but they may not have actually, the bills may not have actually been paid. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but at December 31st, you'd received the revenue, but you hadn't spent it yet, or it hadn't been, the check hadn't been written. Probably when I do the first quarter, that hopefully will all be gone.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions, Council? Councilman Meyer.
I don't have a question, it's more of a comment. I just really appreciate your reports, Dean. It's been a while since we've seen the financial report, and every time that you've done a report, it's been something that I can understand where we're at. They've just been a bit easy to digest, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm hoping I will try to show Barb how to do these reports so she can get you one every quarter.
Other questions online or comments, Council? Okay, Helen, back to the manager's report.
Thank you very much, Dean. You're relieved of your duties. You can go back to your peaceful evening.
Yeah, it's almost bedtime.
We appreciate you staying up late.
See you later. Thank you.
Okay, be well. So in addition to the financials from Dean, you also noticed that there's a report from UBS, our investment management team that's handling our permanent fund accounts. They will be at our next meeting to give you a report. I will also have a draft investment policy for you at that time. I wasn't able to get that together, mostly because there's been a bit of research involved in trying to get a document that really reflects best practice at this point in time. I've had several meetings with our consultants who are helping with that policy, and I feel confident we'll get you something that will update what we currently have, our 10-year-old policy, and provide us with something to look at at the beginning of June at the very latest. I do want to speak on personnel issues. We have lost some key people recently, and I'm pleased to say that we have some very competent and exciting applicants who are applying for both the Parks and Rec position and the planning position. And we are working Parks and Rec. We had 2 members of the Parks and Rec Commission who participated in interviews this week, and we'll be engaging members of the Planning Commission also with interviews with our planning applicants. So I'll have hopefully a positive report for all of you, and I know all of us on staff will be relieved to have full complement of people working on our behalf. So I want to speak also to ask Nate, who I believe is here, to give an update on where we are with things around the police department. He's been working with a consultant to better understand best practice and get himself some support to, as he becomes the very capable chief he will be and is. So I'd like for him to speak to some of the things he's been working on. So Nate, thank you.
Push the red and hold it until it turns on. Giving you a light, okay.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, I've been working, as Helen said, with Greg Russell, a consultant who's been giving me a lot of input and feedback. He's a consultant who does this kind of work for a lot of different police departments. In fact, he recently prepared a report for Nome's police department, and he's been working with them over the last couple of years when they've been doing things. And we've been working on going over things. He's the kind of guy, personally, who what he does is he raises the question, and then I get to look for the answer if I don't know it. And he knows the right questions to ask. So he's very capable in that regard. It leads me down roads to look at things that I may not have known about or known to look for. Sometimes if you don't know the question, you're not ready for the answer because you're not aware that that exists. So I've been going over a few things. Most of that is in my report. A couple of things I'll touch on is, one, our operation procedures manual. It was last drafted, I believe, in 2009. Previous chiefs to me have issued memos to amend certain parts of that over the years, which is common practice for chiefs to do. They'll issue a memo immediately to amend a practice or a procedure or to add one that wasn't in there. But then they've never gone back in and tried to go through it and add all that in. So that's one of the projects I list that I am working on. It will be a lengthy project to work on. I forwarded some of that to our attorneys at their request. They don't believe they've ever possibly seen that recently, so they want to see what we have and some updates that I've started on that. So they'll work on that. Another point in there was the advisory group. That advisory group existed. I believe George Wintle, the chief, established that a number of years ago. It was an informal group of 4 or 5 or 6 folks that he sort of met with like once a month. And I believe it continued under Chief Hicks and it got dropped along the way somewhere. People didn't schedule meetings. And so I've kind of revived that, asked some members of the community to join that, and I'm still working on that. I'm trying to get it into a group that's fully represents the dynamics of our city. I don't have everybody there yet at the table that I kind of would like to have, but that's kind of where I'm going with that. Provide feedback to me, I can provide feedback to them, questions can be raised and perhaps answered. And down the road, I kind of like to see that perhaps morph into something more codified. I'm looking at other cities that have that in place as sort of more formal commission. So that's kind of all I have on that. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Council, I'm just going to comment, that committee, the last time I remember that is especially around updating the public safety building, the one piece that didn't kind of give it included. And there was a little bit of community representation there, but it was mostly EMS and police themselves. So I'm glad to hear that. And I thought that was a great venue because you're pulling in community knowledge and other organizations for opportunities for partnering on updating our facilities and whatnot, which are one of our last remaining infrastructures we haven't touched in a long time.
Thank you, Nate.
Sure.
Appreciate it. I want to speak to some grants that we're pursuing. As you know, Harbor is our #1 priority. We are hyper-focused on the Harbor right now. Our Tier 1 grant is in front of the legislature and was in the governor's budget. And with the influx of COVID infrastructure funds, we have strong beliefs that that will be funded. John Bitney is there lobbying on our behalf, working closely with those folks that could help influence that decision. We still remain #1 on that Harbor priority list, and so I'm fairly confident, knock on wood and other hard objects, that we're going to get that. Speaking of that, the BUILD grant, which is the $25 million grant that we've been working with through the Department of Transportation to try to get, we've applied for it twice, have not succeeded. In the past, there's been only a limited number of dollars available, and if a state gets one of them, that's considered lucky. The NOFA came out, which announces that BUILD grant. They're allowing 4 per state. They believe that's the maximum that will be funded. So again, knock on hard surfaces, we should have a very, very strong chance of getting that grant. We have been working closely with the BUILD administrators to understand the deficiencies in our prior applications, and we're well on the way to getting a strong application in place. And staff has been absolutely focused on that. I just really want to thank all of them for their hard work, because this is a community priority from years ago, and we're finally, I think, seeing some light. I also want to say that we are, have a tentative commitment or indication that EDA, Economic Development Administration, will give us as much as $9 million towards the project. So when you start adding the numbers up, we have the opportunity to do a sizable investment in our harbor and perhaps go beyond the South Harbor. And I think back to what Clay was talking about earlier, because of the federal infrastructure dollars that have not yet been announced but likely will, we are actively looking at engineering and design for other projects in the harbor and other projects in town that potentially could be shovel-ready for those infrastructure dollars when they hit the ground. So we are pursuing that in earnest. We just got a Rasmussen Foundation grant to put some soft surface in some parks where young people have been injured on playground equipment. And that's another funding opportunity that we certainly can better utilize with library and museum coming from their 501c3 organizations that support them. They're eligible for those grants and could provide some resources to those institutions. So that's an area we're moving. Let's see. Clay mentioned the meeting with Bill Thomas. We got some good information, and we're going to pursue legislative assistance with funding. And I think that covers me for now. Any questions, please let me know.
Councilman Allison.
What's the status of the back stairway here? I know Sam said something about it here a couple minutes ago.
I'm going to let her speak to that. It's coming up soon.
So I talked with...
Yes? Yeah, it turns off. You have to push and hold the red until you see the light going. It's on.
I talked with Jake Mills, who is the DOT rep for that project. He almost has the final a bid written up. We have the construction easement in place. He is hoping to have the project completed by late fall, out to bid in June.
Thank you.
Other questions for City Manager, Council? Okay, I'm going to revert to Mayor's report for just a second. I forgot one item. I wanted to thank the Latter-day Saints, the church, for being out Saturday morning when we had the meeting with Representative Thomas. They sweeped all the Main Street sidewalks in front of the businesses. And just wanted to thank them for that. And also Pastor Leppert with the Church of the Nazarene had their Soup Saturday. Lots of volunteers involved with those efforts, just taking pride in our community and help each other out, and wanted to acknowledge those. Also, Representative Stutes reached out. She's going to be here, wants to be here for Salmon Jam later this summer. She visits our community a lot, but just thinking out loud, we're in the final stretch of the legislative session, and I think it's a good idea, at least for Helen and I, to set up a call with Bittany and Representative Stutes and her staff to just make sure we're punching home some of these items, and maybe even council wants to. I can't imagine she wouldn't be up for, depending on her schedule, even a Zoom meeting with council or something, or calling in. So I just put that out there. And then we have the U.S. Coast Guard change of command, virtual change of command this Friday. Admiral Bell, who had a chance to come to Cordova and visit here and express some of their needs and whatnot. And so I'll get that to you, Susan, so that you can circulate it to council if anyone wants to. Let me see. Maybe that isn't a shareable RSVP. I'm going to attend on the city's behalf. And city clerk's report.
Okay. So per the last meeting, there was a request that I put in a little primer for correspondence. So that's in tonight's packet that I wrote up on page 82. Just give people the understanding about when stuff makes a packet and when it doesn't. And then as things happen in my office and I feel like it needs council input, I'll just throw it in a report. And then I'm not going to talk about it too much, and you guys can read it and decide and bring it up at pending agenda if you so choose, or that's what I'm going to just do from now on. So there's a few things in there for that. And that's about it. And I leave town tomorrow for, I think, 8 days. I'm back on the 4th. I'll be at the meeting on the 5th.
Okay. Any questions, council, comments on any of the reports, clerk's report? Okay, thank you. We have the staff quarterly reports. As Helen mentioned, UBS will be giving an update next meeting. Any comments, questions on staff reports? Okay, as always, thank you for those reports, staff. We have correspondence, Comfish and processing from UFA, email from Carl Becker regarding heliskiing, letter from Mayor Cash supporting code revision, and a letter to the legislature opposing the Board of Fisheries appointment. I'll just mention I got quite a bit of feedback on that, word that carefully to express our feelings, but any comments, questions on correspondence?
I'd just say what.
Councilman Baylor.
Oh.
Okay, Councilman Baylor. Then Gleason.
Yeah, the letter from Mr. Cass. I wonder if that maybe something that should be run through planning, planning and zoning to take a look at and make some recommendations on.
Helen?
I just want to let everyone know that there was a planned project in a neighborhood that came to all of our attention either through impacted parties in that neighborhood or from the individual directly who wanted to make some changes. That individual chose not to submit an application for city manager, what was it again?
A permit.
A permit, yeah, wanted a permit, conditional use permit. And so that issue went off the table. But it brought up the question of whether or not, as our code is currently written, it's appropriate for me as city manager to make those kinds of decisions, and under what circumstances. So this was a revision. I'm not sure. It certainly can go to planning and zoning. We don't have a planning director at the moment, so there might be some delays in that, but there's no pressing need at the moment to address this.
Okay, thank you. And Councilman Gleason.
That would satisfy me.
Oh, sorry.
Hopefully when I get back to town, I can sit down face to face and talk with the manager on it. So thank you for that.
That's almost the identical thing I was going to say, so.
Okay.
Question answered.
Can you hear Councilman Gleason?
Because he's not using his.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, I'll just remind these mics, you got to get right up on them so that they can hear online. Councilman, oh yeah, you can't.
You have to get closer to Dave.
You're on a short leash there.
I guess I can move.
You can roll your chair. You got 6 feet there. Okay. Councilman Gleason just mentioned he was going to ask almost the identical, or make the identical comments, Councilman Baylor. So other comments, question, clerk's report? Correspondence, I'm sorry, we're on to correspondence now. Okay, hearing none. Ordinances and resolutions. The first is Ordinance 1195. That's an ordinance of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending Cordova Municipal Code Chapter 3.10, Conflicts of Interest, to update conflict of interest declaration processes, incorporate the common law rule of necessity that permits conflicted officials to vote when necessary, and defining substantial financial interests and official actions, and amending Cordova Municipal Code Chapter 18.90, Historic Preservation Commission, and Cordova Municipal Code Chapter 3.52, Advisory Parks and Recreation Commission, to streamline conflict of interest commission requirements and update formatting and language, and this is a second reading.
So move on second reading.
Second.
Have a motion, Allison, and second, Sherman. Councilman Allison, to your motion.
Yeah, I didn't get any comments. We didn't have anything at the public hearing tonight, and so I think it's appropriate to go ahead and approve it.
Councilman Sherman, Vice Mayor Sherman, to your second.
Same thing.
Okay, given lack of discussion, I'll just, is there any discussion from council rather than going through the list? Any discussion on the second reading? Okay, roll call vote, please.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
and Ann Schaefer is absent. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, the next item is ordinance number 1196, and this is an ordinance of the City of Cordova, the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending the 2021 city budget and authorizing the transfer of $100,000 from the General Reserve Fund, commonly referred to as the Permanent Fund, to the Governmental Capital Projects Fund number 401 to upgrade and provide security to the city's impound lot. And this is a first reading.
I move to approve ordinance, I lost the number, 1196.
Second.
Have a motion Sherman and a second Baylor. Vice Mayor Sherman, to your motion.
So again, I'll just echo what I said last time. I feel like the staff did a really good job of taking our comments and addressing all the issues that we saw. I feel that we're in a comfortable financial situation that we can afford to take from our permanent fund to fund this project. I think adding the security and being able to handle the impounded vehicles in a more proper way and any other stolen items that need to be stored can help alleviate some of the police department's worries and maybe even add up a little bit of dollars here and there. So I think it's a good investment.
Councilman Baylor, to your second.
Yes, I would echo those comments and add that staff did a really good job of looking at other options. And I think it really comes down to this spot, and it is in an industrial zone, so I think it's kind of appropriate for there. This isn't a residential area or a business area, it's an industrial zone, so I would support it.
Okay, and I'll go in order here on discussion. Councilman Gleason.
I'm in support.
Councilman Schaefer is absent. Councilman Gard.
I'm in favor.
Councilman Ellison.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the tracks here. I think we're way too early to be taking money out of the permanent fund when we have already, we've been threatened to have a budget revision for sometime in the first part of the year, and we're already almost in the middle part of the year. We haven't got any reports for 2021 at all yet. We have no idea where we're at the budget. We're short some staff, so we should be saving some money there. We just don't have any clue, I don't think, where we're at. Dean might have an idea, but again, he was only on March bank reconciliations, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's comfortable with where all the bank numbers are. As he said, we've got plenty of cash flow, although most of that was in a allocated account already for something, but it certainly gives us time to analyze our budgets and determine if we're really going to need to take the money out of the permanent fund. Taking the money out of the permanent fund isn't easy just for that reason. Just because there's $9 million or $10 million in that account doesn't mean that we can just start spending it. Sooner or later, it will be gone. And it's easier to, if we take money out now, it's easier for staff or whoever, the council, in September, whatever, we see we've got some money in the general fund that because we haven't spent as much, or we got some extra money from something else, and all of a sudden we're going to be looking for ways to spend more money. And when we took money out of the permanent fund, I hope if that happens and this passes, that council will consider putting money back into that permanent fund, because it's hard to take it out for a reason. This project was budgeted at one point in time last fall. It was taken out of the budget when they were trimming things out that they didn't think maybe we needed right away. All of a sudden, it's a big emergency here in middle of April that we have to now take money out of the permanent fund to fund this thing. And I just don't support that at this point in time. I think that staff needs to look at their budget that they've got, where they're at currently in this year, and see if there's a potential to do some things with their budget, to move some things around to pay for this with the general fund. I don't support taking money out of the permanent fund. I know we don't need 7 votes tonight. We'll need 7 votes on the final reading for it. I will not be one of the 7 votes until we get a budget revision, until we can see where our budget is at for this year using the general fund money. So I don't support taking money out of the permanent fund. I think there's other options, and it sounds like it will pass on first reading, but certainly on second reading, I will make you vote plenty of times, and I will have some revisions for you if it's still a majority of the council thinks that it's important to take this out of the permanent fund. I just think we're too early in the year, not knowing any information about our 2021 budget, to be taking this out of the permanent fund.
Hey, Councilman Meyer.
Thought a lot about this impound lot, and taking money from the permanent fund is not something I think any of us do lightly. I'm going to vote not in favor of this tonight. I guess just knowing that I'm very on the fence and may vote on it on a second reading, but I agree with a lot of the points that Allison brought up. I just don't know that we know exactly where we're at right now. I also agree with a lot of the points that was made before. I think staff did a really good job on making the presentations, looking at the spots, and putting all the work that they did to do this. Thinking about it, we've never really had a good secure spot for our impound lot. I think it's always been a problem. It's not a good look where it's at right now. And then it kind of just brings up in my head the bigger issue that we have is the public safety building that we have. It needs work, and we had a joint session with the school board, the school district. They need more money. An impound lot of cars that don't look good in front. I want to clean it up too. I don't know that I would be in favor of pulling it out of our permanent fund, or that it's an emergency type funding. So I will not be in favor of it tonight.
Okay, Councilman Sherman.
Question to the manager. Dean, I thought I heard him say he would have the first quarter report for 2021 at our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, is there any way, once he completes that, he can, well, share it with staff first, and staff can look at it and see if there are any other potential funding areas?
I think I can speak to that now. We have a very tight budget, operating budget. The reason that this was removed from the budget last year was because it was very clear that we didn't have operational dollars to spend on this type of project. The reason it came back was because it was on the pending agenda list. I think the council had indicated that it was a priority, get it off. It was part of the policing survey as a priority. And so that's what we did. So, you know, if we want to postpone that and wait and include it in the 2022 budget, that's certainly an option. But the motivation for bringing this forward at this time was council direction around getting it off pending agenda. It'd been on there too long, languishing, and the only place that funding would be available at this point in time, given COVID and all of the considerations of that, would be coming out of the permanent fund. So I just want to give some background on that as to how it transpired.
I think from the presentation too, after 3 readings, you're right in the middle of construction season. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Melina Meyer,
No.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Jeff Gard,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
David Allison,
No.
and Ann Schaefer is absent. Motion carries 4-2.
Okay, so we had moved an item. The next item was item 9 on the consent calendar, and that was council action to waive a right to protest a renewal of liquor license number 954, the Reluctant Fisherman Inn, for which Councilman Meyer declared a conflict of interests, and I would like to recuse herself. So that is now item 23A on the new business agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion Baylor and second Gleason. To your motion, Councilman Baylor?
All in favor?
To your second, Councilman Gleason.
I'm in favor.
Further discussion, council?
Question?
Question's been called. Hearing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Melina Meyer is conflicted, David Gleason,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
and Shaver is absent. Jeff Guard.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so when the reluctant reopens very soon, there'll be beverages available on the deck.
Clay's buying. What?
With a liquor license,
Is Clay applying?
Bye.
because he needs a job.
A little bird mentioned that they may be opening soon. Let's see, item 23 then is the council action on the proposal for the eastern half of Lot 3, Block 17, original town site.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Ellison.
I move to approve the proposal from Craig Kuntz for the eastern half of Lot 3, Block 17, original town site.
Second.
Have a motion, Allison, second, Gleason, quick on the draw. To your motion, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, it makes sense. We've seen this before us a couple of times, and it's been through the planning commission a couple of times, and Craig was the only one interested in the property. He's going to join it to another lot. He's already, he's agreed to pay for all the expenses to get that done. So he's paying fair market value or the assessed value. So I think it's a good deal.
To your second, Councilman Gleason.
Well said, Dave Allison.
Okay, sounds like two in favor. Any council discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Motion carries, passes. Next item is council action on disposal and method of disposal of Tract A, Group C, Alaska State Land Survey 73-35.
$139.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilman Sherman.
I move to dispose of Tract 8A, Group C, ASLS 73-35 as outlined in Cordova Municipal Code 5.22.060B by negotiating an agreement with Native Conservancy to lease or purchase the property.
Second?
We have a motion, Sherman, and I'm sorry, that was Meyer? Second, Meyer. To your motion, Councilman Sherman.
I think we all know the dangers of that area, and yet in the summertime it does provide a nice potential use, and I'd like to see it be used for something. And I think they're well aware of the avalanche hazards, and it has gone through the planning commission, and I see it as something that could be positive.
Okay, Councilman Meyer.
Yeah.
Second.
My point's exactly, I think that it would be nice to see that land be used for something. And I think we're all aware that it has limitations to when it can be used. So if I really look forward to someone taking on that project, because I think it's a big project, getting all the permits and getting all the everything in line to be able to use it. So I think it would be awesome. And growing food and has been a priority in this town, and the hard part has been land. And I think out there, if there's an organization willing to do the work to do it on restricted land. I think that's beneficial all around.
Okay, let's go in order on council discussion. Councilman Gard.
I'm in favor.
Okay, Councilman Schaefer's absent. Councilman Gleason.
It's already been cleared, so I'm in favor.
Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, I guess I have two concerns. The one would be, I'm wondering if we shouldn't strike or purchase the property since we never intend to sell that property. And I realize that would have to come back to the manager to negotiate the sale of that in council, but why give even the indication that it is available for sale? So I would leave that to somebody at the site, at the hall there if they want to think about that. The other thing is this property needs to be cleaned up at a specific date. If it doesn't get cleaned up, then the city's going to be liable. So is there a process where we could have them give us a bond to make sure that the city of Cordova doesn't get stuck with the cost of cleaning up that site on the proposed due date? I guess that would be a question for the manager.
Okay, I don't know if you're prepared to answer that question now.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, no. I can definitely get an answer. I haven't put a lot of energy or time into this at this point, waiting for your approval to go ahead, and then certainly when we start conversations, we can address every concern that you might have.
Okay, so from Councilman Baylor, that's the, does council really want to sell it or just lease it? And then again, the, some kind of surety that the, performance regarding the cleanup. Okay, and Councilman Allison.
Yeah, well, council can't sell it. I think the wording is just in there because that's the wording in our code for that option. So it can't be sold. We know that. The manager knows that. There are a lot of issues that need to be negotiated with this regarding that cleanup and done by October 1st or whatever date is appropriate. Look at the snow history and make sure it's out of there before any snow flies and those kind of things. But I'm certainly in favor of working on a lease, as long as they're paying all the permitting fees and such. I think it's could be a good project for Cordova, and plenty of room to expand out there if things go good. So it's a good seasonal use for that property.
I think that was the FEMA red zone language that property can't be sold. Is there any objection to just striking or lease out of this?
Or sell.
I'm sorry, or sell, thank you, or purchase. I scratched it out and couldn't read it. Any objection to striking or purchase, just for clarity?
No.
Okay, hearing none, I'll just read to lease the property. Any further discussion on that item? That again is to direct the manager to dispose of that Tract A, 8A, Group C, Alaska State Land Survey 73-35 by directing the manager to negotiate an agreement with Native Conservancy to lease the property. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And the next item is a discussion of the COVID-19 emergency response. Any discussion, council? Helen, would you like to preface the discussion?
I just want to add to what Dr. Sanders alluded to earlier. We're actively looking at demobilizing the whole incident command team. We'll be working with our attorney in the state to make sure that we are covered if there's any need to have any portion of that emergency order in place so that we have access to federal and state dollars. So we'll get that clarified. But actually demobilizing our emergency response, any restrictions that we have from masks on down the line, I think we're prepared to soften those, if not totally eliminate them, by the time we bring up the emergency or the expiration of the standing emergency order in early June. One of the things that has been slightly cautionary is the influx of the fishing industry coming in early May for the gillnet. There was some desire to just kind of see how that goes before we eliminate the mask order. So at this point, we're moving forward to do that in late May, early June, and we'll certainly keep you posted.
Any discussion, council?
I guess I would just say, I think we're ready now. I mean, I think people that want to get vaccinated have been vaccinated, and postponing it any longer, it just doesn't seem like that it would help anything. Either the vaccine works or it doesn't. We're going to find out sooner or later. So I do think the processors are still going to have closed campuses. I don't know that that's, unless you're just talking about commercial fishermen.
It's the influx of the fishing fleet, basically. The processors have asked us, and we have agreed to close off streets again this year. They're trying to protect their workers and protect their industry. The last thing they want to do is have an incident where they have to close down because of COVID outbreak within their processing employees. So they're being very restrictive in terms of how they handle their employees this year. And again, the big unknown is that our community may be vaccinated, but we want to give ourselves an opportunity to see how the fleet arrival in town and as the industry picks up here, if there's any impact. And it's just cautionary. Again, we're moving forward towards that day when we're going to say no more masks. Basically everyone can, we'll have cautions out, what recommended health protocols, but people can observe them or not. And we're just waiting for probably another month or so before we feel comfortable. The entirety of the medical team feels comfortable removing the mask rule. But it could happen earlier.
Okay, Councilman Meyer, then Councilman Sherman.
I guess to the idea that everybody that wants to be vaccinated is fully vaccinated, I guess I would just caution against that. I think, I know that I've just had one dose yet. I haven't gotten my second dose. And I even just talked to people this last week, and they're asking me how to sign up because they didn't feel comfortable signing up before or were somewhat skeptical about the vaccine. And I think just because a lot of our population has gotten it, some people are feeling a little more comfortable to finally sign up. I gave out information to 2 people today about it. So I would just caution against kind of going sooner than when we've been saying June 1st. I'd rather just stick with our day of beginning of June, personally.
Okay, Councilman Sherman.
Yeah, I'm in favor of sticking with the plan to go to early June, late May. I'm watching states that are, dropping masks and opening up and not getting vaccinations, and watching nursing homes. Can I go visit my husband's 98-year-old mother? No, I can't. Still can't. So I'm urging everyone this, just a few more weeks is all we need to do, but I think we need to be cautious. So I'm in favor of the plan right now.
Okay, this is good, Council. That's why we have this item on the agenda for discussion. So discussion, Councilman online or other discussion?
Guess they hung up.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to pending agenda, CIP list, calendar, elected and appointed officials list. Councilman Meyer.
I just know that you kind of brought up the capital improvement list to talk to our representative about it, and I was just thinking of number 4, a public safety building. That was, I consider the impound lot kind of part of that a little bit, and just kind of stressing how important getting another building is. That building is extremely old. We're talking about pulling money out of our permanent fund to make secure locations, and might be worth bringing up to our representatives that we have a really old public safety building and it needs to get funded. I don't know how long it's been on this list, but probably since before I was born. So it's probably been a while.
Clay?
Councilman Gleason.
So this isn't for pending agenda, but when Stutes does come to town, I think we should ask her to approach Sam Raybong, since we have Sam where he's at right now, and see what kind of conversations they can start on getting Upper Copper back under Comfish management. It was like 1990, they went to Sportfish, and since then it's just been a disaster for our fleet. And you just look at the stair steps, we've had to step back, and I don't even know if that's a possibility, but the department has made that call in the first place. So if we can start those conversations to get that, or at least have the city of Cordova be in support of them pursuing that. If we could get that to happen, that would be a game changer for our management on the Copper River.
Okay, and I'll just say for the record that Commissioner Raybong did do some outreach work up to the sport fishing groups up the river, and they didn't even realize that it was Comfish funding that was paying for the management. So it's Comfish funded management by Sportfish.
Well, they should.
Okay.
They don't ever pay a dime for anything. They buy a sport fishing license and do whatever you want.
Okay, so let's take a note here. And Representative Stutes was working on a bill for self-funded fisheries for management, especially things like the cucumber dive fishery that they were going to try to implement this year in Prince William Sound, but the pandemic delayed it a year or so. Other discussions on the pending agenda? I'll just mention, I don't want to misstate this, but I know that the public safety building was kind of envisioned originally as part of the overall Cordova Center and looking for alternative. I think the original plan was to have parking space down in that area where that building is, and to look for but the location was the big barrier. But it is a high priority overall, and I guess just a reminder that that was part of a bigger plan for many, 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 many years. So
Again, it might be a good shovel-ready project if we could decide on a location.
Mayor Copeland, this is Councilman Schaefer.
Councilman Schaefer, welcome. Pending agenda.
I
And
just wanted to say I was just able to call in.
okay, thank you. We're just on the pending agenda items and just discussing and also capital improvement items. We mentioned earlier in the meeting, Representative Stutes is the Speaker of the House, and we had visitors and outreach from two governor's special representatives, and that was just a reminder from our former representative, Bill Thomas, who's now a representative for the governor and came to Cordova this week to remind us of met with Manager Howarth and myself and other organizations in the community, CCMC, just reminding us that the state has significant funding coming through and available. A lot of those decisions are going to be decided legislatively, and we should make sure that we're communicating well with our Representative Stutes along those lines. So, any other discussions along?
12:30 a.m. So
yes,
it would help to move along. Thank you.
Yes. I was just getting there, Councilman Baylor. Thank you. So audience participation, that number again is 6202. And do we have any audience participation in the room here? Okay, so we don't have any calls coming in. Next item is executive session.
No one in the room?
Want to do council comments first?
Yeah, why don't we do council comments, sorry. Councilman Gleason, start in the room.
Dean's not on anymore, probably, thanks. I'm glad to hear that he's back on the books. Thanks to Barb for her comments and all the reports.
Councilman Allison.
Yeah, appreciate all the reports. We don't comment on them much in the regular meeting, but they are read and appreciate those reports from the department heads. So thank you.
Councilman Meyer.
Just thanks for all those reports. They were really good to have. And then I just wanted to comment a little bit about the impound lot, that I'm very much on the fence about the fence, but I may lay the other way next time around. I just voted no today because I'm not 100% there yet. So that was just my comment on that.
Okay, Councilman Sherman, Vice Mayor Sherman.
I just wanted to say thanks to the school board. I really learned a lot today, and I have a list of questions, so I'm going to be seeking out Christy or Alex and ask some more.
And online, Councilman Guard.
Yeah, just like to thank staff for all the hard work they put into the packet here. That's all. Thank you.
Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, thanks staff, and once again, we struggle to find money, $100,000 for a fence, money for another police officer, money for short staff, and yet naively, I think people think we can run 2 clinics in this community and a hospital. It's pretty clear to me that we just can't afford that, and the best thing for this community is to get one healthcare system so we can afford these other things. So, thank you.
And Councilman Schaefer.
Hi, yeah, sorry. I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to make it to the school board meeting, and then I was very late this one. Had a long day out in the field, so I appreciated all the reports, and yeah, I look forward to watching the YouTube of the meeting, catching up.
Okay, well, thank you for calling in when you were available, so appreciate it. I'm going to confer with the clerk for just a second. Jesus, I didn't get it. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Council, Vice Mayor Meyer and I did meet with the city clerk and were able to review her, present the summary from council and discuss contract modifications and whatnot. I did not get those prepared for council in time for the executive session, so I would suggest just deferring that till the next meeting. And then just consider the other executive session item we have on the agenda for tonight.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, and because I do have that in front of me here from Holly, I'm just gonna read that executive session for item is recommended to council. And then and then you can make that motion if you choose to. So it would be to, Holly, are you online? Would you like to state that?
She's waiting for us.
She should. Oh, shoot.
Okay. Well, while Susan's calling her, I'll go ahead and just read off what she sent here. It's an executive session for a presentation of proprietary Native Village of EAC information to City Council regarding Native Village of EAC grant opportunities and options for collaboration between the city and the Native Village of EAC in the provision of community medical services. And that executive session reason is per Cordova Municipal Code 3.14.030A, option 3.
So move.
Second.
So we have that motion to go into executive session from Councilman Allison and seconded by Councilman Gleason. Any discussion by council? Hearing none.
Can you be clear on how online to get back to this meeting?
Yeah, I'll text her.
Yes, Susan will text the call-in information to call back in for the executive session to you. Any other discussion by council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll recess for 3 minutes or 5 minutes to clear the room and then go into executive session.